My husband Kieran opened our bedroom closet on a quiet Tuesday evening and turned completely pale. "Marlowe," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "What is that?" When I saw what he was pointing at, hidden behind my winter coats, I felt my entire world tilt sideways. What I discovered that night didn't just change how I saw my marriage, it shattered everything I thought I knew about the person I'd been sharing a bed with for 3 years. The truth was so devastating that by morning, I was questioning whether the woman I thought I was had ever really existed at all. Let me take you back to the beginning of that day, because context matters. Tuesday, October 15th started like any other day in our little craftsman house on Elmridge Avenue in Millbrook Heights. I'm Marlowe Chen-Reeves, 30 years old, a freelance graphic designer who works mostly with small businesses in our area. Kieran is 32, a software engineer at a mid-sized tech company downtown. We've been together for 5 years, married for 3. And if you'd asked me that morning to describe our relationship, I would have used words like solid, comfortable, and predictable in the best possible way. We weren't the couple that posts constant social media updates about our perfect life, but we weren't unhappy either. We had our routines. Tuesday mornings meant Kieran left for work at exactly 7:47 a.m. after kissing my forehead and saying, "Have a good day, beautiful." I'd work from my home office until around 2 p.m., then usually run errands or meet my friend Sage for coffee. Kieran would get home around 6:30, we'd cook dinner together while listening to podcasts, and we'd spend the evening either binge-watching something or reading in comfortable silence. That particular Tuesday felt especially ordinary. I remember thinking how grateful I was for ordinary. My 20s had been a whirlwind of bad relationships, career uncertainty, and the general chaos that seems to define that decade. Meeting Kieran at 25 had felt like finding calm water after years of swimming against riptides. He was steady, reliable, kind. He remembered important dates, never left dishes in the sink overnight, and had never once raised his voice at me. Not even during our worst arguments. Our biggest relationship conflict that week had been about whether to replace our ancient coffee maker or keep nursing it along with daily prayers and strategic button pressing. That's the kind of problem I thought we had delightfully boring ones. I spent that Tuesday morning working on a logo design for a new bakery called Rising Sun Artisan Breads. The owner, Mrs. Delacroix, wanted something that felt both rustic and modern. Which sounds like an oxymoron until you've spent 3 hours trying to make a wheat stalk look contemporary. I was deep in color palette decisions when my phone buzzed with a text from Kieran. "Running late tonight, probably won't be home until 8. Order whatever you want for dinner. Love you." This wasn't unusual. Kieran's job occasionally demanded late nights, especially when they were rolling out new software updates or dealing with client emergencies. I texted back a quick "no problem, love you too," and went back to my wheat stalks. Round 2 p.m., I decided to take a break and tackle some household tasks I'd been putting off. Our bedroom had been gradually accumulating that particular kind of mess that happens when 2 working adults get busy. Clean clothes draped over chairs instead of hung up, books stacked on nightstands, random items that didn't have obvious homes. I'm not naturally the tiddiest person, but something about the approaching weekend made me want to reset our space. I started with our shared dresser. Folding and organizing clothes that had been living in various stages of clean but not put away. Kieran's side was, predictably, already mostly organized. He had this habit of dealing with things immediately rather than letting them pile up, which was one of those qualities that had attracted me to him in the first place. My side looked like a textile explosion had occurred, which was more typical. After the dresser, I moved to our walk-in closet. It's not huge, maybe 6 by 8 feet, but it was one of the features that had sold us on the house. Kieran's clothes occupied the left side with military precision, work shirts arranged by color, pants hung with exactly 2 inches between hangers, shoes lined up like soldiers. My side looked like a rainbow had gotten into a fight with a thrift store. I spent a good hour just sorting through my clothes, creating donation piles, and trying to remember the last time I'd worn that emerald green dress I'd bought for someone's wedding 2 years ago. There's something meditative about organizing clothes, especially when you're not rushing. I found myself thinking about how different Kieran and I were in these small ways, but how well we complemented each other. He kept me grounded, I helped him be more spontaneous. He was the planner, I was the dreamer. It felt like a balanced partnership. Round 4 p.m., I decided to tackle the top shelf of the closet, which had become a catch-all for seasonal items, old purses, and random boxes we'd never properly unpacked from when we moved in together. I'm only 5'4". So reaching the top shelf required the small step ladder we kept in the hallway closet for exactly these purposes. As I was pulling down a box of winter scarves, I noticed something I'd never seen before wedged way in the back corner behind some old suitcases. It looked like a small duffel bag, dark navy or black, pushed so far back it was almost invisible unless you were specifically looking from the angle I happened to be at. My first thought was that it must be something of Kieran's that I'd simply never noticed. He was more organized than me, but he also had a tendency to store things in logical places that weren't always obvious to other people. Maybe it was camping gear, or old college textbooks, or sports equipment from his brief attempt at joining a recreational softball league last spring. I almost left it alone. Part of me felt like I'd already done enough organizing for one day. And besides, if it was Kieran's stuff, he might have a specific system for where things went. We'd never explicitly discussed boundaries around going through each other's belongings, but we generally practiced a policy of asking before reorganizing the other person's stuff. But the bag bothered me in a way I couldn't quite articulate. It wasn't just that I'd never seen it before, it was how deliberately hidden it seemed. Not just stored, but concealed. The more I looked at it, the more intentional its placement appeared. Someone had pushed it back there specifically so it wouldn't be easily found. I told myself I was being paranoid. Kieran had lived in 2 apartments before we moved in together, and I'd lived in 3 different places during my 20s. We all have random boxes and bags of stuff that get shoved into storage spaces and forgotten. I probably had items I'd forgotten about too, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. And the longer I stood there on that step ladder, looking at that carefully hidden bag, the more I felt like I was already crossing a line just by seeing it, which made no sense. Because it was in our shared closet in our shared bedroom. There shouldn't be anything in our house that I wasn't supposed to see. I climbed down from the ladder and tried to go back to my organizing, but I kept glancing back at that corner. The bag seemed to have acquired a magnetic quality, pulling at my attention every few minutes. I found myself creating reasons to look in that direction, adjusting hangers or moving shoes, all while stealing glances at that dark shape in the shadows. By 5 p.m., I'd finished organizing everything I could reasonably organize. And the bag was still there, still bothering me. I tried to rationalize my growing unease. Maybe it was old photo albums that Kieran kept private because they contained pictures of his ex-girlfriend, Natasha. They dated for 2 years before we met, and while he didn't talk about her much, I knew she'd been important to him. I could understand wanting to keep some mementos private while still not being ready to throw them away. Or maybe it was something related to his family that he hadn't felt comfortable sharing yet. Kieran's relationship with his parents was complicated, not bad, exactly, but distant in a way that suggested old wounds that hadn't quite healed. His father, Harold, was a retired military officer who'd run their household with the same precision he'd brought to his career. His mother, Beverly, was a former debutante-turned-corporate wife who measured success in terms of appearances and social standing. Kieran loved them, but he'd also spent most of his adult life trying to become someone different than who they'd raised him to be. Maybe the bag contained family documents, or letters, or photographs that brought up feelings he wasn't ready to discuss. I could respect that. Everyone deserves some private emotional space, even in a marriage. But even as I ran through these reasonable explanations, something in my gut kept insisting that this felt different. This felt like a secret, not just something private, and I'd never known Kieran to keep secrets from me. We'd always been honest with each other, sometimes to a fault. He'd told me about his college drinking problem, about the time he'd been fired from his first job for calling his boss an idiot, which, to be fair, his boss apparently was, about his struggles with anxiety and his complicated feelings about therapy. I'd shared my own messy history, the eating disorder I'd battled in my early 20s, my complicated relationship with my perfectionist mother, my fear that I wasn't really good enough at anything to make a living as a creative person. We didn't have a perfect relationship, but we had an honest one. Or at least, I'd thought we did. By 6 p.m., I'd moved to the living room and was half-heartedly attempting to work on the bakery logo. But I kept checking my phone and looking toward the bedroom. The bag had taken up residence in my mind like an unwelcome guest who wouldn't leave. I tried to focus on color palettes and font choices, but my brain kept circling back to that dark shape in the corner of our closet. I told myself I was being ridiculous. Kieran wasn't the kind of person who kept secrets. He was almost aggressively honest, sometimes to the point where I had to remind him that not every thought needed to be verbalized. He was the type who would confess to stepping on a spider because he felt guilty about killing something, even accidentally. The idea that he was deliberately hiding something significant from me felt incompatible with everything I knew about his character. But then again, how well do we ever really know another person? I'd thought I knew my college boyfriend, Derek, pretty well until I found out he'd been cheating on me for 6 months with his study partner. I'd thought I knew my best friend from high school, Carmen, until she spread rumors about me to get back at me for dating someone she liked. People are capable of compartmentalizing in ways that can be shocking, even to those closest to them. At 7 p.m., I ordered Thai food from our usual place, pad Thai for me, green curry for Kieran, and tried to settle in for a normal evening. But normal felt impossible with that bag occupying so much mental real estate. I found myself wondering how long it had been there. Had he put it there before we moved in together, after, recently? Had I somehow missed it during previous cleaning sessions, or was this the first time it had appeared in our closet? I tried to remember if Kieran had been acting differently lately, if there had been any signs that he was dealing with something he didn't want to share. But honestly, if anything, he'd seemed more relaxed and happy than usual. Work was going well. We'd just finished paying off his student loans, and we'd been talking more seriously about maybe starting to look for a bigger house in a year or two. There had been no red flags, no suspicious behavior, no unexplained absences or mood changes, which somehow made the hidden bag feel even more ominous. If he was keeping something secret, he was doing it very, very well. At 7:30, I gave up any pretense of working and decided to take a shower. Hot water and steam have always been my go-to remedy for overthinking, and I figured maybe I could wash away some of the anxiety that had been building all afternoon. As I stood under the spray, I tried to talk myself through the situation rationally. Option 1. It was something innocent that he'd simply forgotten to mention or hadn't thought was important enough to bring up: old college textbooks, camping gear he never used, memorabilia from his brief stint playing guitar in a terrible band during his mid-20s. Option 2. It was something private but not necessarily problematic. Family documents, old letters, photos that brought up complicated emotions but weren't anything that would affect our relationship. Option 3. It was something he was keeping secret because he thought it would upset me, but that was ultimately harmless. Maybe he'd been buying me a surprise gift and hadn't found a good hiding place for it yet. Maybe he was planning some kind of romantic gesture and needed to keep supplies hidden. Option 4. It was something genuinely problematic that he was hiding because he knew it would damage our relationship or my trust in him. I wanted to believe in options 1 through 3. They fit with the Kieran I knew and loved, but option 4 kept creeping into my thoughts like a persistent shadow, and the more I tried to dismiss it, the larger it seemed to grow. By the time I got out of the shower, I'd almost convinced myself that I was creating problems where none existed. Kieran would be home soon, we'd have dinner, and maybe I'd casually mention that I'd been organizing the closet and ask him about the bag. If it was innocent, he'd explain it easily. If it was private, he'd ask me to respect his space, and I would. Either way, we'd handle it like adults who trusted each other. But when 8 p.m. came and went with no sign of Kieran, I started to feel That familiar anxiety creeping back in. He'd said he'd be late, but he was usually pretty accurate with his time estimates. By 8:30, I was checking my phone every few minutes, oscillating between worry that something had happened to him and irritation that he hadn't updated me. At 9 p.m., he finally walked through the door, looking tired but not unusually so. "Sorry." "Beautiful," he said, dropping his messenger bag by the door and coming over to kiss my cheek. The client call ran way longer than expected, and then I got stuck in traffic from that construction on 5th Street. "No problem," I said, and meant it. The relief of seeing him safe and normal was enough to temporarily quiet the voice in my head that had been building conspiracy theories all evening. "I ordered Thai food. It's in the fridge if you want me to heat it up." "You're amazing," he said, loosening his tie. "Let me just change clothes and I'll come eat with you." He headed toward the bedroom, and I felt my stomach drop. He was going to change clothes, which meant he was going to go into the closet, which meant there was a chance he'd notice that I'd been organizing and might wonder if I'd seen anything I wasn't supposed to see. I tried to act natural, reheating his food and setting out plates while listening for any sounds of surprise or concern from the bedroom. But a few minutes later, he emerged in jeans and a t-shirt. "Looking perfectly normal. The closet looks great," he said, settling down at our small dining table. "You've been busy today." "Yeah, I was feeling motivated," I said, trying to keep my voice casual. "Found some stuff I'd forgotten about." "I know the feeling," he said, taking a bite of curry. "I should probably go through my side at some point, too. I think I have clothes in there I haven't worn in years." It was the perfect opening to mention the bag, but something held me back. Maybe it was the way he was eating so normally, chatting about his day and asking about mine. Maybe it was the fear that bringing it up would change something fundamental between us, and I wasn't ready for that possibility. We spent the evening like we always did, him telling me about the client call that had run late, a small nonprofit that couldn't decide between 3 different website designs, me showing him the logo concepts I'd been working on for the bakery. It felt normal and comfortable and exactly like every other Tuesday evening we'd shared. But underneath the normalcy, I felt like I was holding my breath. Every time he laughed at something I said. Every time he reached over to touch my hand. While he was talking, I found myself wondering if I was seeing the real Kieran or just the version he wanted me to see. It was an awful feeling, like discovering that your favorite song has been playing slightly out of tune this whole time, and now you can't unhear the discord. We went to bed around 11 p.m. Following our usual routine, Kieran brushed his teeth while I washed my face, then we switched. He set his phone on the charger on his nightstand, I set mine on mine. He read for about 20 minutes while I scrolled through social media. Then we both turned off our lights and settled in for sleep. "Good night, beautiful," he murmured. "Same as always, good night," I whispered back, but I didn't sleep. I lay there in the dark, hyper-aware of his breathing, wondering what was in that bag and why it felt like it was radiating some kind of ominous energy. From 20 feet away, I kept thinking about all the crime documentaries I'd watched over the years. All the interviews with people who said they never suspected their spouse was capable of whatever terrible thing they'd done. But that was ridiculous. Kieran wasn't a criminal. He was a software engineer who got genuinely upset when he accidentally killed houseplants. He volunteered at the animal shelter on weekends and always left bigger tips than necessary at rest warrants because he'd worked in food service during college and remembered how hard it was. He was not the kind of person who had dark secrets hidden in duffel bags, yet the bag was there, and it was hidden. And I couldn't think of any innocent explanation that required that level of concealment. I must have finally fallen asleep sometime after 2 a.m. because the next thing I knew, Kieran's alarm was going off at 6:30. He got up, showered, and went through his normal morning routine while I pretended to still be asleep. I heard him moving around the bedroom, opening drawers and the closet door, but there were no sounds of surprise or concern. After he left for work, I lay in bed for another hour, staring at the ceiling and trying to decide what to do. I could pretend I'd never seen the bag and go on with my life, trusting that whatever it wasn't anything that would hurt me or our relationship. I could wait and bring it up casually sometime when the moment felt right. Or I could look inside and settle the question once and for all. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that pretending I hadn't seen it wasn't really an option. It was already changing how I felt around Kieran, making me second-guess things that had always felt certain. If I didn't find out what was in that bag, it was going to slowly poison our relationship anyway. But looking without permission felt like a massive violation of trust. What if it really was something innocent and private, and he found out I'd gone through his things? What if it was something that would hurt me to know? But that didn't actually affect our relationship. What if I was about to cross a line that couldn't be uncrossed? I got up and made coffee, trying to think through the ethics of the situation. In an ideal world, I would just ask him directly. But something about his completely normal behavior the night before made me hesitate. If the bag contained something problematic, would he really have been so casual about me organizing the closet? Would he have made no effort to check if I'd seen anything? Maybe the fact that he seemed unconcerned was actually evidence that it was nothing worrying. Or maybe he was just that good at hiding things. By 10 a.m., I'd had 3 cups of coffee and was no closer to a decision. I tried to work on the bakery logo, but I kept finding myself staring in the direction of the bedroom. The bag had become like a tumor in my consciousness, something foreign and potentially dangerous that I couldn't ignore. Finally, round 11 a.m., I made a decision. I would look. But I would be careful about it. I wouldn't disturb anything unnecessarily. I wouldn't go through everything, and I would put it back exactly as I'd found it. If it was something innocent, Kieran would never know I'd seen it. If it was something problematic, at least I'd know what I was dealing with. I walked into the bedroom and straight to the closet. Before I could lose my nerve, I got the step ladder and climbed up to reach the top shelf. The bag was still there, exactly where I'd seen it the day before, wedged behind the suitcases in the far corner. I pulled it out carefully, noting exactly how it had been positioned so I could put it back the same way. It was heavier than I'd expected, and when I set it down on our bed, I could see that it was made of good quality canvas, dark navy blue with black handles. It looked expensive. Or at least well made. Not the kind of cheap duffel bag you'd buy for a weekend trip, but something designed to last. There were no external pockets, no tags or labels, nothing to give me any clues about its contents or where it had come from. The zipper was slightly stiff, like it hadn't been opened in a while, but it wasn't locked or secured in any way. I sat on the edge of the bed for a moment, my hands resting on the bag, giving myself one last chance to change my mind. Once I opened it, whatever was inside would become part of my reality. There would be no going back to not knowing. I took a deep breath and unzipped the bag. The first thing I saw was clothing, which was so anticlimactic that I almost laughed with relief. Just clothes, neatly folded and stacked. For a moment, I thought all my anxiety had been for nothing. Maybe it really was just old clothes he'd been meaning to donate, or seasonal items he'd stored and forgotten about. But as I looked more closely, I realized something was wrong. The clothes weren't Kieran's style at all. They were women's clothes. But they weren't mine either. And they weren't just any women's clothes, they were specific, coordinated outfits that suggested someone had put thought into assembling them. There was a red dress. Simple but elegant, the kind of thing you'd wear to a nice dinner or a work event. A pair of dark jeans, expensive looking, with a cream-colored sweater that would complement them perfectly. A black skirt with a matching blazer that screamed professional wardrobe. Underwear and bras that were clearly not my size. They were smaller, more delicate, with lace details that weren't my style. Under the clothes, there were shoes. 3 pairs, all in a size 7. I wear an 8.5, all in styles that would coordinate with the outfits above them. Black heels, brown boots, white sneakers that looked like they'd never been worn. At the bottom of the bag, wrapped in a silk scarf, there was jewelry. Not expensive jewelry, but pieces that were clearly chosen to complement the outfits. A simple gold necklace, pearl earrings, a watch with a leather band, a few rings in different styles. Everything was clean, organized, and deliberate. This wasn't a random collection of items someone had thrown in a bag. This was a carefully curated wardrobe for a woman who wasn't me, stored in my husband's hiding place in our shared closet. I sat there on our bed, surrounded by another woman's clothes, feeling like I was living in someone else's nightmare. My hands were shaking as I picked up the red dress and held it up to myself in the mirror. It was too small for me, maybe a size 6 where I wear an 8 or 10 depending on the brand. It was beautiful, though, and expensive, the kind of dress that required thought and planning to purchase. The underwear was even more disturbing. It was clearly meant to be seductive black lace. Red silk, styles that prioritized appearance over comfort. It was the kind of lingerie you buy for someone else to see, or for someone else to buy for you. As I sat there trying to process what I was looking at, I heard a car door slam in our driveway. My heart stopped. It was barely noon. On a Wednesday, Kieran shouldn't be home for hours, but I could hear footsteps on our front porch, and then the sound of a key in our front door. I had maybe 30 seconds to get everything back in the bag and return it to its hiding place before he walked into our bedroom and found me sitting there with another woman's wardrobe spread across our bed. But my hands wouldn't move. I sat there frozen, holding a stranger's red dress, listening to my husband's footsteps getting closer, knowing that in about 10 seconds, my marriage as I knew it was about to end. I heard Kieran's footsteps pause in the hallway, then quicken as he approached our bedroom. There was no time to hide what I'd found. The red dress was still in my hands. The other clothes scattered across our comforter like evidence at a crime scene. My heart hammered so loudly I was sure he could hear it from the doorway. Marlowe. I forgot my laptop charger, and his voice cut off abruptly as he stepped into the room and saw me sitting there, surrounded by another woman's wardrobe. The silence stretched between us like a taut wire. I watched his face cycle through emotion, surprise, confusion, and then something that looked almost like relief. That last reaction disturbed me more than anger would have. You found it, he said quietly, his shoulders sagging as he leaned against the doorframe. What is this, Kieran? My voice came out steadier than I felt. Whose clothes are these? He closed his eyes for a long moment, running his hands through his hair in the way he did when he was trying to buy time to think. When he opened them again, there was something different in his expression. The easy confidence I'd always associated with my husband was gone, replaced by something vulnerable and raw. They're mine, he said so quietly I almost didn't hear him. What do you mean they're yours? I held up the delicate black lace bra. This is clearly not there for me to wear. The words came out in a rush, like he'd been holding his breath for 3 years and finally exhaled. Marlowe, I've been cross-dressing since I was a teenager. These clothes, they're what I wear when I need to be myself. The room tilted sideways. Of all the scenarios I'd imagined, affairs, financial secrets, criminal activity, this hadn't even entered my mind. I stared at him, trying to reconcile the man I'd married with this revelation that felt like meeting a stranger. You've been doing this our entire relationship, he nodded, not meeting my eyes. I know I should have told you. I wanted to, so many times, but my father, when he found women's clothes in my room when I was 16, he sent me to 3 different therapists to fix me. My mother acted like I had some kind of disease. I learned to hide it, to compartmentalize it. By the time I met you, it felt too late to explain. I looked down at the careful collection, the coordinated outfits, the jewelry chosen to match. When do you? When you visit your sister in Portland, when you go to those weekend design conferences. I drive to the city, go to a support group. There's a community center where people like me can be ourselves safely. His voice grew stronger as he spoke, like admitting it was freeing something inside him. I rent a hotel room sometimes, just to spend a few hours feeling like the person I really am. The pieces started falling into place. His occasional weekend work emergencies that I'd never questioned. The way he never wanted to travel with me to visit my family. His insistence on doing his own laundry. Small things I'd attributed to his fastidious nature suddenly took on new meaning. So there's no other woman, I said slowly. There is. He sat down on the edge of the bed, careful not to disturb the clothes. But she's me. Her name is Kira. She's who I am when I don't have to pretend to be the man everyone expects me to be. I sat there processing this information, feeling like I was meeting my husband for the first time. The relief that he wasn't cheating warred with the hurt that he'd kept such a fundamental part of himself hidden from me. 3 years of marriage, 5 years together, and I'd never known that the person I slept next to every night felt like they were living a lie. Why didn't you trust me enough to tell me? The question came out more wounded than angry. Kieran's eyes filled with tears. Because I love you too much to lose you. Because I know how this sounds, how it looks. Because my last girlfriend, Natasha, when she found out, she said I was sick. She said she couldn't be with someone who wanted to be a woman. She made me feel like there was something fundamentally wrong with me. I'm not Natasha, I know. But the fear, it never goes away. Every day I wanted to tell you, and every day I talked myself out of it. I thought maybe I could make this part of myself smaller, less important. I thought if I loved you enough, if our life together was good enough, maybe I wouldn't need Kira anymore. I picked up the red dress again, imagining him wearing it, trying to picture this other version of the person I'd married. But you do need her. Yes, the admission came out like a confession. I do. And I hate myself for it sometimes, because it feels like I'm betraying you by having this other life. But when I'm Kira, when I'm wearing these clothes and presenting as the woman I feel like inside, it's the only time I feel completely honest. Show me, I said impulsively. What? Show me, Kira. I need to see who you really are. He stared at me like I'd asked him to jump off a cliff. Marlowe, I don't think 3 years, Kieran. 3 years of marriage and you've been hiding this from me. If we have any chance of moving forward, I need to understand who I'm really married to. He was quiet for a long time, looking at the clothes spread between us. Finally, he nodded. Okay, but this changes everything. You know that, right? Once you see me as Kira, you can't unsee it. Everything already changed the moment I opened that bag. He picked up the red dress with hands that were no longer shaking. Give me 20 minutes, I nodded, and he gathered the clothes carefully before disappearing into our bathroom. I sat alone in our bedroom, trying to process what was happening. My husband was about to emerge as someone entirely different, and I had no idea how I was going to react. 20 minutes later, our bathroom door opened, and Kira stepped out. She was beautiful.